Doing a bad job. Okay, let me start
you
the
don't.
Okay, recording started, and off you go. It's all yours.
Okay, thank you. So I'm gonna start the presentation. And I wanted at first to show just a few slides. I ended with much more than I thought, but don't worry, it's code. So it's not that theoretical that it might sound when you see how many slides I have. So first, I would like to talk to you about the React in making PCFs, and most of it, how to use the React hooks. And first of all, I would like to tell what React hooks are. But first thing first, a few words about me. My name is Diana Birkelbach, and I have a blog where, well, I name it Dynamics. So it's a kind of mix between Diana, Dynamics, and a mix of Dynamics. And well, I'm the PCF lady because in the last years, all I do is PCF actually. I work for Orbis AG. We are in Germany, and I work there for already 20 years. And beside my blog, you can see here my Twitter handle, my LinkedIn. The GitHub one has another name because I'm now in Germany, but I'm originally from Romania, and that's my hometown. And it's an old account. Okay, I am a super user in the PowerApps community forum since last year, and this year in January I became an MVP. So about hooks in PCF development. As an agenda, I would have the difference between class component and function components. The most important React hooks, like useState, useEffect. What are the custom hooks? And I have an announcement. I have an NPM package that I'm developing right now. That's the Dynamics PCF utils, and you can use in making PCFs. And at the end, I will go in optimization of hooks. So when we develop PCFs, we have, as we already saw today, we have the init method, we have the update view, we have the get outputs and destroy. And the most important part that I usually do here, I just take the container that we get from the framework and save it in a variable. I also take the notify output changed. And beside that, I don't do much. The only stuff that I still have in my component are the value, the current value, and sometimes a callback for my components. I think it's pretty important to say also about the destroy, because often I forgot to do that, but I think it's pretty important to unmount the component. And I took the documentation from the Microsoft Learning. That's a screenshot from Microsoft Learning, where it's shown how the data it's going and how the events are going in a PCF. And on top of that, I've made my own change, just showing how a React component it's interacting with the PCF and with the framework. And we can see first, we get in the start, we have the init or the update view method that will be called. And when there is a change, we notify the platform and get the outputs, and the outputs are sent to the host, and that one will be sent back the component. But if I have my own component, React component, in the PCF itself, I only hold the value and the onChange callback, and my React component, it's only based on the value and callback, and of course some other properties, but the value is just a prop. And when something is changed inside my React component, I call the callback, the onChange callback, that will be passed to my PCF, that will come a notify. Then we can get the output. So the framework runtime will get the outputs. The change will be notified to the host, and after that the platform decides if the value will be accepted, and in that case, we have all the way back from the framework to the React component with the new value. And if was not accepted, then we'll have also an update view called with the old value and an error. But the most important part, I don't have to take the value inside my React component, because it's enough to have it in the framework, because the framework will notify it anyway if there is a change or not. A few thoughts about PCF with React. First of all, when I develop PCF, I try to separate the data and the UI. And usually I don't make class components, because for me they are pretty big, and they are getting pretty chatty, because you have to take care of the state. And for me they are pretty hard to read. So what I try to do, I try to split and reuse parts. And that's better because I can read it better, I can test it better, and I can maintain it better and refactor. And my wish was to have a library that I can use, and that way my PCF will be faster to develop, and I don't have to take care of each detail. And that's what I was trying to do. First, let's see the difference between a class and a function component. So when we have a class component, it's a class and will extend a React component, and the most important part, you have there a return with the HTML part, actually. When you have a function component, you don't you just have a function and you just return that part. That's pretty straightforward. What about passing props? It's pretty much the same in both cases until now, because you can have access to the properties through this props. And when you are in a function component, you can just use the structuring and have access of your properties and just render them. But when it's going to handling state, there start to be more differences there, because for having a class component, you need to have a constructor, you need to call the super, you need to save the state in an internal state, and you have to call the set state when this changes. When you have a function component and you get the properties, you have now access to the React hooks. That's how they are called. This was not possible until React 16.8. So until then, the function component was not able to have a state. And now the hooks let you hook into this React state and the lifecycle features from the function component. And these React hooks cannot be used inside a class component. So this function component still doesn't have a state, but it allows you to hook to this state. So about useState, that's the first hook that we see today. is you can have a state, and the second property that you can destructor, it's the setter. So that's the function which will allow you to set the state. And you just declare as a constant the state, the setter, and the use state with the initial value. There are some more possibilities, like you can use lazy loading. So the initial value is actually a function that can be called. And also there are some cases where you can use the setter and you get a parameter, the previous value, and you can calculate the next one based on the previous value. You can have now in function component more states. So you can split the state that you have in class component in more states, in smaller ones. And that makes it easy to split the code and take it apart. Also, the state, it's asynchronous. We have to keep in mind, and I think it's the hardest part in the beginning is to understand how it works. The second hook is the use effect. That's actually a replacement of the React lifecycle methods, because in the class component you have component did mount, component did update, component will unmount, and we have to have a possibility also with the function component. And that's the response of a function component with a use effect hook. So you declare use effect, you pass a function, and you have the dependency. And the content of the use effect is a function where you can treat the changes, and you are allowed to have a return, also a function where you can clean up the component, the effect. About the dependencies, there are three possibilities. So if you use effect without dependency, this function will render every time the function component will render. If we declare the dependency an empty array, then this will be executed only on the first render. And if we have some variables that you can use there, then this content, so the function, will be called only when this one changes. And when you have a look, comparing again the class component and the function component, you can see that the component did mount and component will unmount. What's the ones that we have used in class component, by using use effect, we declare that with this one will be executed only once. That's the content that will be executed. So basically that's component did mount, and we have here a return. That's a function, and that's the corresponding to the component will unmount. The life cycle, it's not exactly like in the class component, but we also have to keep in mind that in a functional component, the use effect, it's not run only once. So you have to keep in mind in case you have more states that you have to update with that. There are some more important hooks, like use context. This one avoids props drilling. So when we have a component that's calling another component and another component, we don't have to pass the properties from top to the bottom. We can use the use context, and there are two parts of it. The first one is defining the global provider and wrap the component inside, and the second one is the use context that can be used inside a component. I'm going very fast, just to have heard about these ones, but we will go in an example right away. About useRef, it's another hook where you can have a reference of your component. So you just declare it as useRef as a constant, and you can see it as an instance of a variable. You have the input and the reference to it, and after that you can have access to your element inside an event. And the next one that's still important is the use reducer. In case you have heard about Redux, that's pretty much the same. This one was took inside the hooks from the React itself. It's not a replacement, but there are some possibilities. It's actually the same as useState. The only difference, but I won't go that deep in the details now because I think it's too much. You have the state and the function. It's this time a dispatcher that will get a function, and basically for this function you have a state, you have an action, and you return the next state. So looking to the hooks, we can first see the most important ones: the use state, the use effect, use context, also use reducer, and use ref. And there are a few more to come when we talk about optimizing, is the use callback and use memo. We will go to that one later. There are some rules that we have to take care in React. So the rule of hooks, you can only call the hooks on the top level. The hooks has to be executed in the same order. So you cannot have a hook defined inside a if or in a loop. You can call the hooks only in React functions, and hook don't work inside classes. And pretty interesting part here is that you can define more effects in your class component, and again split the logic in more parts. So why do I like the hooks? They are easier to read and refactor, and I can split the state in smaller parts. It's possible to combine, so to make a better composition. The hooks allow me to write the logic in a more linear way. I don't have to jump between the events of my class. Actually, I can write the code linearly. And also a very important aspect of the hooks, we can split this logic and make it easier to share stateful logic between different components. And you can write these hooks. So basically the custom hooks, you can write them and use it inside the same project, but you can write them and use it in more projects. When I first heard that the function component will be rendered every time there is a change in the hook, so in the state, basically, I was worried about the performance. But the team is telling us there are no significant difference between class component and function component. Because on the other side, the hooks avoid the overhead from the class definition. So class instances binding to event handler in the constructor doesn't need the deep component tree nesting. like in the high order component, so the other way to split the logic in class components. So basically, they are just functions, and React has less to do in order to take care of rendering. And the performance concern, there are some workarounds, there are some solutions for that too. The problem was about callbacks, and there are some optimizations that I can show you at the end. So about custom hooks, what you see right now, it's actually pretty straightforward. So I have a component, and all I have here, I have a few states that I had to take care of when I have a data set PCF. And everything, it's about paging here. I have the first item number, the last item number, the total records, current page, and so on. And I have the use effect to react to changes in the data set. And I have some functions to move to the next page or to the previous. And in the end, I just render a button, and I have a previous button, the page, and the next button. What if everything could be written like this? So I have a function component this type, where everything was that was in this area could be extracted in a custom hook, and I've called it use paging, and my whole PCF actually, so my whole function component, it's nothing except this. There are some well, the naming conventions for the custom hooks, they should start with use, and the rest is pretty much free. So in my case, use paging, there are a few thoughts about how to return a value. For instance, we can return a single value. If you look back, this use paging was returning all these properties, so you can see it. I've destructured it there. So I can choose between a single value, I can have an array, and I can have an object. And there are some rules what to choose, what is better. So when there are not too many, it should be array. And when there are a lot of properties, then should be an object, because I don't have to remember the order. But there are some cases where I expect a lot of properties, but I still want to use the hook several times in the same React component. And in that case, I can use the object directly and not destructor, like you can see it here. So I use the hook, and I take everything inside that object, and then I have access to these properties. And what I did, or actually I'm just working on, it's an NPM package where this kind of functions that can be commonly be used in more PCFs, I try to have it there. So that's the NPM package called Dynamics PCF Utils. You can just install it by npm install, like any other package, Dynamics PCF Utils. And you have here the address, and it's open source, of course, and you can find it in my GitHub. And you can see what's inside right now. So I have environment variable functions, get Boolean, number, string, JSON, and I have a few hooks until now. use environment variable, use resource image, or use resource images. I'll go in details right away. And this custom hook for paging that you just saw. So how do we use these hooks? When it's about resource image, you just call use resource image. There is a good blog from Benedict Bergman about how to use an image. And I thought, okay, why not have a hook for that? And you just have to write a line of code for that. And in that case, use resource image. So you just have the resources parameter and the name of the image and the type, and you get it right away, and you can use it. You have there the SRC that is loading the error message. The same here for environment variable. It's pretty similar, but I go in the details because I'm going to show you right now the documentation page. So in this package, and you can find this documentation also on my GitHub. You can see how you can install it. You can have it, the environment variable functions, then you can use, and you get a few advantages using this, because first of all, it takes care if there is a value, you will get that. Otherwise, you will get the default value. The type conversion, you have possibility to ask for an object and will automatically make the JSON conversion for you, or a Boolean or a number. So you have the time conversion and IntelliSense right away. And you have caching. You can opt, actually it's default, but I save automatically not only in the cache, but also in the session storage. That way, the next component that will be loaded will have it automatically without needing to make a request for that. But if you don't want it, you can set, I have a function for that, you can set it on false and it won't cache in the session storage. And based on this functionality, which it's not a hook, you can use the hook for environment variable, and you just have to write use. So you have the constant value is loading error message. Use environment variable, you define it as a string, and unfortunately I couldn't find a better way. You have to define it again what to type. There is this one, it's not enough because TypeScript will be transpiled to JavaScript anyway, and that way this type it's only in the design type time, but not once will be running as a JavaScript. So I needed a parameter for that. The first parameter, it's the web API, so it's the feature that the PCF is giving you. The second, it's the name as the image, and the third, it's the type. But everything you have to do is this line of code, and after that you have access to these ones. Or if you have to call it the second time, you can have the complete inside, so the complete value inside this object. So in order of this to work, you have to allow in the manifest the feature usage for web API. The next one are use resource image or the use resource images. So if you have some resources and you define in your manifest that you need a few images, and we were going to need also the utility feature in the manifest, then you can write inside your component use resource image, you pass this resources from the feature, the name of the file and the type, and after that you can just return the image and you have the SRC that's made for you there. Similar is for using resources. So when you have more images to load, in my case I had an array, I have another hook for that, because this way I don't have to react to every change from every single state. I can
Have you not finished graphing?
Treat it as a single state. And the last one that's there for now, it's the use paging that we just saw. So you just need to install this NPM package and just use it with use paging. And after that, you can make your page navigation. And using that, I've made a short demo. So I have dataset PCF, and I have there about how many records? 14 about. So if I show it with a PCF, I show the record, so the name is from the record, but the image is one of the 10 images that I have inside my PCF. So just have it done again and again in the same order, and I have here the navigation from one page to the other one. And I think the most important is how it's looking the code. And this one is also open source, so you can see it on my GitHub. Actually, I can show you, I think. So PCF utils is the code for the NPM package, but I have here a repository for PCF utils dataset, and you have the whole code here that I will show you. And as I said, we'll start with a manifest. So I just have a data set. I have the images that I declared there, and the web API and utility. And of course, the images are inside my project. In the index, I don't have much. That's everything that it's there. So unmount and in init and update view the render. I don't need to do more than that. And inside the render, I just pass the web API dataset and resources, and I render this component. And here's everything what the component it's making. So I have an array with the image names, and using that, using that, I just load the resource images, and I have it in a constant. I also have an SVG because that's a kind of, it's a little different, but I just wanted to show that it works. That's the small one, the SVG. And for environment variable, I just have this line of code and the web API and the image, the name and the string. And also, if you have a look, because I was running this, you can have in the application, that's the environment variable that I set. And there's the name of the environment variable that's saved there. So I will have it for the next run again. But you can change the name of this root of the session storage. And I have the hook for the paging, and it's not much left. This line of code, these ones, are only for having the selection. So I have a state for selected IDs, and I have a callback for changing, because this function makes also has also a click, and when I click there, it's selected. You can see that the ribbon is changing, and I can interact with the ribbon for these elements too. So every time there is a click, I pass the ID back, and I decide if I have to clean the selection or make a new one. And there is a small if, so if the data set is loading, I'll just show a loading. And the main part of my component, it's this return. I have the buttons, the image, and I have a loop, so a map here with the sorted IDs, and for each of them, I render a card. The card is the other component. It's also not much inside. It's the title, it's the image SLC. I have the ID of the record I'm clicking. I have the on-click callback, and is selected because if it's selected, I want to show it red, otherwise not. And the return, it's only a div. I have an image and a div inside that. Nothing special there. And I have an on-click, and on-click I have a use callback. But that we will go to the optimization there and show why I use there. So that was about the demo. So the next one, I was afraid that Fiddler would screw my teams during the meeting, so I have a small recording here where I can show how I work with this state. So it's about understanding how the hooks are working, and in that case, I have use resource image for an array. So in that case, I have about 10 states that I handle here. And we can see what happens when it's running. So you can see that the function was called at least 10 times. I think it's a little more. And when I go to the next, there are not so many anymore. So this 10 times were about these images. And if I disable that and I use the other hook, use resource images, so I have one promise for all the images that I load. And it's a small change there. I use Fiddler here, so take just a short moment. And if I refresh my page now, you can see on the downside of my page, so in the console, that now won't be called that often anymore. So there are still a few times. It doesn't mean that it actually renders the HTML at that time, but it's entering my function. And next time, not anymore. You can see that the only time it's taking, it's the request in the network protocol. So when we talk about optimizing, we have 3 points we have to think about. The first one is the use memo. That's for expensive calculation. That's actually it's making nothing else but the memoizing. That's the optimizing technique by storing the results of expensive function calls. That's not React based, but React has a function for there. Sorry, we have to use memo, not the memo. It's a little confusing there. Okay, so we have the use memo that's making this memoization, as I told. So it returns a memoized value. But that's exactly for expensive calculations. So basically, we will use that when we make requests and or some function that have to take a long time. The other one is the use callback, and that's pretty much used because this way we don't define each time a callback when this function is called, but it will take the dependency as we see here on the screen. We have the use callback, and we have the dependency on ID and ID selected. And this function will be defined only when one of these parameters are changing. And for the onClick, we just have to attach the function with use callback. Use callbacks is actually nothing else, but it's the equivalent for use memo, where instead of function, we have another function that's generating the function. And now the memo, that's the possibility to cache the whole component actually. So when you are in class component, you can use should component update. And when you are in a function component, you use React memo, and you pass there the whole component in line. And you can use it without dependency, but you have the possibility to define a function which will tell the React framework that something was changed or not. So there's a function becoming the previous value and the next value. And return value will be true when props are equal. And in that case, it won't render the function again, the component again. So just telling React to skip the rendering there. And again, I'm using here React memo, and I have this should component render dependency. And again here, I'm showing us a small video just to tell how this this memo has an effect to rendering. And I'm using the profiler from React. So I started, so I let it render, and I click on 2 cards. And after that, stop the profiler, and you can see it was rendered about 9 times. And in each of them, I click there, and you can see here it's everything green. That means it was rendering every time, again and again, each card. Even in the end, even in the last 2 times, when I click on each card, all the other cards are rendered. And then I go back in my component and I use React memo. And I have the dependency, so I tell him when not to render. And I start again the profiler. And I make exactly the same steps. And I click on 2 cards. And this time we can see they are still 9 times rendered. The first 2 are complete, but after that, the cards are gray. That means they are not rendered anymore. React is determining there that it's the same component and it doesn't render. And you can see the last 2 ones. That's the click on the first card. It's only one that's rendered, and the next one it's the click on the second card, and there will be the 2 cards rendered. So the one I have to change the color back from red to black, and to select the new one. So the recap on optimizing is the use callback for the handler, use memo for expensive or for retrieving data, and React memo for the component. That's the steps that I follow. And that's the end. And I I'm free for your questions.
Can you post the link to the NPM package that you have created? It would be great for people to get them downloaded.
So that's the example. And the other one, it's the NPM package itself. And of course, the NPM package, install them. I was much faster than I thought, but I'm not very sure if it would have helped to go more in detail here, because you need a little time to get used with these concepts.
Yeah, and installing the PCF util that you have created as an NPM package, that is, we would just have to do npm install and then do @dynamics/ that's how you have to do it, right? Okay. Yeah.
That's
just
I'm
so
just
that people
showing
would
you.
know how to install it.
Yes, that's all you have to do. And after that, you can see in your package JSON that it used, that's the Dynamics PCF utils. And if you go back in the component where it was used, you just have to import them from the Dynamics PCF utils and just use it, and that's all.
Yeah, this is so like this. I'm pretty sure this is going to make so many people happy, especially the paging. That's so complicated all the time. I have been running into issues using that, and I always go to my first code that I used paging to see how I actually implemented it. So now I think so this particular util would actually make my life easier building PCF controls using React.
Yeah, that was my intention. When I made the colorful option set PCF, I had the same idea, because I extracted the hooks and I already overworked them in generic and not so generic. And I will try to move this parts in this NPM package, and you can use this paging if you have a grid or if you have a list of cards. But you can also maybe even have the component itself for the whole navigation area, or make a hook for the selection or for the column, because it's pretty complicated to decide what's the width of the columns if you use them from the Fluent UI. I hope that will help the people to make dataset much faster.
Yeah, and again, folks, if you are pretty versed with React hooks or with React, I would really encourage you to create pull request on Dyna's GitHub repo so that we can expand this set of helpful PCF utils. And then we want to reach to a point that we don't need to rewrite code all the time to do menial task in PCF. And then we can just use this util functions and make our life easier.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there is one question, I guess, from Vishal. Are we having any sessions scheduled for React Fluent UI controls? Let me see. Do we have anything for React? I don't see any one for Fluent UI, but I am going to capture some of the Fluent UI, not for PCF controls, but in React in the later session that is scheduled at 5 p.m. So I'm not sure Scott is going to cover any of the Fluent UI. I don't think so. But yeah,
And maybe in the session from last year. They are on YouTube, and maybe you find something there too, but I think it was covered last year.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I'm covering some of the Fluent UI in the last session. So if you want to attend that session, that would be helpful to learn something about React overall as well as Fluent UI.
Cool.
And
so
yeah.
Danish, Victor here. Somebody asked for the slide deck, and I made a joke. I want to make sure that the guy understands that's a joke. They asked for your slide deck, and I said that they could have it for $100,000. But at the end of the event, we can probably put all the slide decks in a repo somewhere, and then send the links to folks. So we'll try to make everything available.
Yeah, and
Sure.
if you have registered on the portal, then that's the easiest way for us to communicate with you guys. So if all the slides, everything that we would be doing out like later after the event is over, like announcing the winners and all those kind of things, if you have registered on the portal, then that's the easiest way for us to communicate back to you with all the details. So make sure that you register. Overall, all positive feedback, no more questions. So Victor said Queen Speed. Another Victor, nice dad, said very interesting presentation. Thank you so much for sharing. Tyrim Hand said, Dinah, you rock. Thank you for such an awesome presentation. Haitim said, thanks Queen. Tipe said, that was very insightful. Dinah, thank you. Jordi said, amazing session, Dinah. I don't have enough thumbs up icons to rate this session. Super. Overall, all positive feedback.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was afraid I would go too much details.
No, I like the
way.
It. Yeah, I like the way you compared the class components with the function components, because that's something that a lot of people get lost. Like, okay, I'm if you're getting the transition from class components to function components, that's what I was like 3 months or maybe 5-6 months back when I was having the transition done from class components to function components. I was like, I have this nice features in class components, but how do I have them in function components? And I was really lost, because like component did mount is one of those things. And then you're like, how can I make that happen in function component? And it took me a while. So your session is really helpful in that way. People can make those transition if they want to from class components to function components and relate all those things that are really confusing.
It's something I wanted to talk since a really long time, didn't have the time, and I took this event as a deadline for me. Okay, you have to make it now. I think we're gonna follow a few blogs on this subject, and maybe we'll help the other to develop faster PCFs.
Yeah. Yeah, and Victor said that's why it hurts so much having to go back to class components. Delighted to see I can keep writing function components just starting out with PCF. Yeah, awesome. Well, it's a pleasure to help you, Victor. The other Victor, not Victor Dantes. Any other question, folks, for Diana or anyone? Well, if there are no other questions, then we still have 10 minutes before the next session. Raj, do we want to play the recording from Hemant? Just a brief thing for 10 minutes. Let's Diana, can you play the recording?
Yes, just a second. just a second. So that's the recording from Hemant, the product manager on PCF. That our keynote speaker, which we played once this morning, and but I'm sure you want to see it too. So I'm gonna share my screen.
My name is Hemant Kaur, and I am Program Manager on PowerApps Component Framework team. We develop UX component infrastructure for both model and canvas apps, and it not just enables first-party developers, but also our ISVs, partners, and customers to extend the PowerApps UX seamlessly. So in today's session, we are going to cover the PowerApps UX development. So let's dive into it. Before we start, I want to quickly talk about why Microsoft cares so much about the low-code platform. It's about the growth and the need for people to utilize different digital services, digital applications to achieve their business scenarios. So to start with, there will be need of 500 million more apps in next few years, which is more than what we have built in last 40 years combined. There are not enough developers, and the lockdown has forced many employees to work remote. With Microsoft investment and focus in the area, Microsoft was named recently as leader in low-code development platforms for professional developers by Forrester Wave. And you can find more information on PowerApps blog, and it's primarily about PowerApps enabling fusion teams, which means both low-code and pro-code developers. It's built on a data platform which has rich connectivity. There are deep integrations across productivity experiences. So PowerApps not just run on PowerApp Mobile, but also you can have the same application running on Teams. It's the extensibility mechanism for SharePoint, and we are extending to more platforms. It's a trusted, secure, and governable platform. We run our Dynamics, enterprise sales, service, and marketing workloads on the same platform. And it's world's most comprehensive low-code platform. So not just applications, but automations, visualizations, chatbots, everything can be built using low-code on the platform. And at the same time, professional developers can utilize more professional coding experience to extend Azure services or add their own experiences to extend their apps seamlessly. So PowerApps front-end today has multiple mechanisms to extend the UX, starting with out-of-box components, the controls you find available out of box built by the platform team. There are components from AI Builder, mixed reality. There are pro-code components, PCF components, which can be built by third party. Increasingly, more and more teams are onboarding, building PCF components on Canvas app. The entire UCI stack on the model apps is built on top of PCF components, and that's how the initiative started. You also have web resources on the model apps, and we have something called Canvas component, which enable developers with low-code app building expertise to build components which can be utilized across app screens or multiple apps. And don't get me wrong, this is not just for the low-code developers, but it's a very quick way to develop reusable components as opposed to actually writing code and then maintaining it and making sure that it works across surfaces. So from approach of solving problem UX project for particular scenario, always it should always initiate with the low-code Canvas component, and if needed, then only the PCF component should be built. So just to recap, we have been talking about convergence of the pro-code components and Canvas components. Now it's much more closer to the reality. On the Canvas app, we started the effort of PCF components. We've seen good growth. We have invested in a lot of out-of-box first-party PCF controls, starting with Fluent controls for team, which were built using PCF framework, AI Builder controls, or Power AI controls, mixed reality controls are built using PCF. and it kind of creates an ecosystem of components. Similarly, Canvas components, which are also marching towards GA, which is slated towards end of this year, are increasingly adding more capabilities to meet the